Hello and welcome to the latest webinar from Essent. Today we're going to show you the advantages of a special type of integration. A punch-out integration connects a seller's e-commerce website with a buyer's e-procurement system. It's an integration that's increasingly required by big buyers, and so having a punch-out-enabled website is a big opportunity for sellers. My name is Doug Brill. I'm the Essent Marketing Coordinator, and I specialize in the promotional products industry. I'm also your moderator for today. Before we begin, a very brief overview of Essent. Essent is the leader in providing comprehensive business management solutions since 1981. Essent has been serving distributors, decorators, and suppliers in the promotional products industry since the year 2000. And more than $3 billion in commerce flows through Essent Solutions each year. We want to answer everyone's questions in a way that's sensitive to your time, so we plan to only answer questions offline. If you do have questions, we ask that you please submit them in the webinar dashboard, and then we'll be happy to answer them for you after the webinar is ended. It's often the case that the first thing people learn about punch-out integration is that they need it. Buyers are increasingly asking sellers for punch-out integration because it facilitates spend management, streamlines workflow, and shortens turnaround times. The prompt from the buyer usually comes in the form of a recommendation or a requirement in a request for a proposal in the RFP. And sometimes it's even a condition of doing business with that buyer. Raising the stakes is that the buyers who most often require punch-out integration tend to be the biggest buyers with the most spend. In short, punch-out integration can be the difference maker in keeping big accounts versus losing them, or winning new accounts versus losing them. The good news is that punch-out integration is affordable and can be implemented quickly, and it has a number of benefits for the seller as well as the buyer, which we're going to illustrate for you today. And with that, here to bring you a closer look is your presenter, David Jungling. DJ is a sales executive for Essent, and he's also a specialist in the promotional products industry. DJ is going to tell you more about punch-out integration, what it is, how it works, and how it helps the buyer and seller alike.
Thank you very much, Doug. Before we get into all of the advantage of punch-out integration, let's first get everyone on the same page. The details of punch-out integration can be a little bit complex. So let's try to say in layman's terms exactly what punch-out integration is. Starting at the very top level, a punch-out integration is an integration between a buyer and a seller. More specifically, it's an integration between the buyer's e-procurement system and the seller's e-commerce website. And the punch-out integration is the method that allows the buyer's system and the seller's website to talk to each other. The result is that the e-commerce website becomes available right within the buyer's e-procurement system. The e-procurement system might be Ariba, Coupa, Oracle, or SAP OCI, just to name a few of the most popular platforms. It could be any number of other platforms. But the bottom line is that the buyer now does not have to leave its own system in order to buy. You might ask yourself, why is it important to shop within the e-procurement system? Why not just navigate to a website? Well, the most important part is that working within the e-procurement system means that buyers are also working within its spend management. That means that it's going to do things like create the requisitions before the transaction moves forward. It's going to enforce and track budgets, contracts, and cost centers. And it's going to give the buyer visibility to things like vendor history, accounts payable, and spend analysis. So these are all things the buyer needs to take into account for each of its transactions on a daily basis. The PunchOut integration effectively takes what the buyer needs for spend management and automatically makes it a part of the transaction. Navigating to the e-commerce website sounds simple enough, but it's not going to address the spend management without substantial manual effort. The integration streamlines workflow. All of that data that the buyer needs is present. So to summarize, PunchOut integration connects the seller's e-commerce website to the buyer's e-procurement system so that spend management is built right in. Now that we've established what PunchOut integration is and why buyers want it, let's take a look at the transaction step by step. First of all, the buying agent is going to log into the buyer's e-procurement system, and the agent is going to open your e-commerce website from right within the e-procurement system. And that website is virtually identical to your regular website. The look, the feel, marketing, navigation, and all of the other effort that you put into your website is retained. So far, it's like anyone visiting your website, except that it's happening through the e-procurement system. The next few steps are very much like traditional e-commerce as well. The buyer browses the site, the buyer selects items and adds them to the cart, and then the buyer hits checkout. It's all what would happen normally. This is where the transaction begins to differ. It's the part where the buyer's spend management is most prominently enforced. What happens in the background is that the buyer is not actually building an order just yet. The buyer is building a requisition. When the buyer clicks checkout, the requisition is submitted to the management or the purchasing department for approval. Only once the requisition is approved is the purchase order issued. The PunchOut integration builds in that extra step that the buyer requires, the requisition process. PunchOut transactions are almost identical to regular e-commerce transactions, except that the buyer spend management is enforced behind the scenes. So the overriding benefit for the buyer is that PunchOut integration allows the buyer to work within its spend management. So to illustrate the value of that, let's take a look at the alternative. And the alternative would be navigating to the seller website like a traditional e-commerce transaction. But the buyer isn't simply browsing items and adding them to the cart. The buyer will have to manually perform its spend management. The buyer would have to browse, take notes on the price, on the availability, the SKU, etc. And the buyer is also perhaps checking contracts to see what the specific pricing is, as well as budgets and cost centers to see how much spend is available. Now the buyer manually turns the notes into a requisition to submit to an approving manager. And only after the requisition is approved is the buyer then coming back to the website to actually buy. So not only is there a delay for the manual process, but availability and other details may have changed during this time. There are going to be manual steps after the purchase as well. That could include manually checking the order status, manually checking the shipping status, and manually paying the invoice. PunchOut integration, on the other hand, is going to eliminate manual steps. It results in a more efficient and more cost-effective transaction for the buyer, as well as quicker turnarounds. A lot of what we've described so far illustrates the benefits to buyers. But what about the benefits for sellers? The biggest advantage of PunchOut integration for sellers is that it's going to open the door to new customers. Corporations, governments, and other large institutions often prefer that their suppliers are PunchOut enabled, and they increasingly require it. And this seller's ability to join in the PunchOut integration often dictates whether the seller gets the business or not. But the advantages go beyond simply meeting customer requirements. A vendor with PunchOut integration turns from just another vendor into a preferred vendor. The PunchOut-enabled seller also becomes front and center for the buyer. Everything the buyer needs to know is right there within the buyer's system. And since the spend management is automatically built in, it's easier for the buyer to buy, and that will lead to more repeat business in the future. The seller also retains a great deal of control that leads to more accuracy and faster transactions. The transaction data is coming right from the seller website, so you know the order is being populated with up-to-date and accurate prices, availability, and other information. The buyer is also going to have automation for its spend management, so transactions can move forward more quickly and efficiently. The seller ultimately gets paid sooner. So the advantage of PunchOut integration for sellers is the potential for more customers, especially big customers. The seller is going to become a preferred vendor because it's easier for the buyer to buy. And transactions are able to move forward much faster due to automation for the buyer and seller alike. Now that we've illustrated what PunchOut integration is and its advantages for the buyer and seller, let's go through some frequently asked questions. One of the first things people want to know is, how fast can the PunchOut integration be implemented? Well, that depends on the depth of the integration, but Express PunchOut can be implemented in a matter of weeks. In terms of e-procurement integration, perhaps you've heard of CIF catalog. That stands for Catalog Interchange Format. CIF integration is like PunchOut integration, but it only integrates the product catalog, not the whole website. The disadvantage is that the catalog is mostly static. Updating is a manual effort. In addition, different catalogs are going to be needed for different buyers because different buyers may have different prices and terms. The CIF catalog also cannot print things like product specifications, bill of materials, or product configuration rules. So it's not ideal for configurable products. The reason that PunchOut integration is usually superior is that it integrates the entire e-commerce website. It's dynamic, so all the information is as up-to-date as your website. The seller continues to control branding and marketing, including cross-sales, up-sales, promotions, and so on. You don't need multiple catalogs for each buyer because the website serves as the master catalog. And the seller can present almost infinite information, as much information as can fit on the website. The ability to perform the PunchOut integration depends on the buyer's e-procurement system. Different PunchOut solutions can integrate with different e-procurement systems. Essent, for example, has experience integrating with the e-procurement systems listed here. Those include the most popular e-procurement systems such as Ariba, Coupa, Oracle, and SAP. PunchOut integration is a critical step for sellers to open the door to big new customers. Not every PunchOut integration is created equally. The Essence solution for PunchOut integration is called PunchOut Now. The advantage of this solution is that it can make the seller's ERP or business management system part of the integration. Essent e-commerce web stores and company stores integrate with Essent back office solutions. So now your own ERP can become part of the PunchOut integration. Adding the ERP into the integration creates two major benefits, which are two sides of the same coin. One is that data from the ERP now can flow into each transaction, and data from the transaction can flow into the seller's ERP. Websites can hold a wealth of information, but it's not the deep, rich data that's held in an ERP system. For example, the ERP will be able to make business rules part of the transaction. Sellers often have certain pricing rules for certain customers. Preferred customers may get preferred pricing, and other customers may have contract pricing. Certain rules, like shipping rules, may also apply. It's common for a buyer to have separate addresses for billing and for shipping. Billing terms can vary from customer to customer. Some customers may have net 30 terms, while others are cash and delivery. And there could even be more rules, such as whether to adjust the invoice for overruns and underruns. These rules all exist at the ERP level and are important for the accuracy of the transaction. And now they can become part of the PunchOut integration. The even bigger advantage for the seller is the flip side of the coin. Data from the transaction will flow back into the ERP. With ERP level integration, data from the transaction can now automatically populate sales orders, invoices, and other associated documents. Manual processes are greatly reduced. Rekeying data is reduced or eliminated, and there are far fewer opportunities for errors. So the ERP level data also brings production efficiency. That's because transaction data can flow into inventory, fulfillment, and product management. The transaction information can also flow automatically into the accounting system. So now postings can automatically occur, and even sophisticated activities like job costing can occur just as a side effect of processing the order. Automatically applying the ERP level data results in what we call well-formed orders. Well-formed orders are complete, accurate, and ready for immediate processing, which results in more efficient transactions. And it all happens because the ERP data is integrated as part of the PunchOut solution. And with that, I'm going to turn you back over to Doug. Doug will let you know how you can learn even more.
Thank you very much, DJ. Just to briefly recap what we've discussed so far today, a PunchOut integration is an integration between a buyer and a seller. More specifically, it's an integration between an e-commerce website and an e-procurement system. More and more big buyers require PunchOut. So the biggest advantage for the seller is that it opens the door to big new customers. It helps you sell to the biggest companies and organizations. The other seller advantages are more efficient transactions, in addition to becoming a preferred vendor. Buyers love PunchOut because it allows them to work within their e-procurement system. That means spend management is going to be built into every order for the buyer. And most importantly, it means buyers are going to prefer sellers who are PunchOut-enabled. The seller enjoys even more advantages when the ERP is part of the equation. Information from the transaction can automatically populate documents and inform production in the seller's ERP in its back office. And that means less rekeying and therefore fewer costly errors and overall a more efficient transaction lifecycle. Essent is dedicated to providing efficiency in the promotional products industry and beyond. Our solutions support all of the capabilities discussed today. Essent PunchOut now integrates e-commerce websites with leading e-procurement systems. To learn more about PunchOut integration, you can visit essent.com/punchout. There, you can review everything we discussed today, and you can also use that page to get in touch with an Essent representative for a free consultation. Again, that's essent.com/punchout to learn more or to schedule some time to talk. Thanks again to everyone for attending today's webinar. Pack a PunchOut to open the door to new customers and more efficient transactions.